A 29-year-old male, got divorced from my wife, a 27-year-old female, 2 months ago. She had been cheating on me with my estranged brother, a 27-year-old male, for a while. 4 months ago, I finally found out when she told me that she was pregnant. Initially, she tried to convince me that the baby was mine, but my brother's frequent visits made me question everything. So I decided to check her phone. When I confronted her about whatever I found, she ended up confessing that she'd been cheating on me with my brother since she had pretty much no other option anymore. My family and I hadn't been on speaking terms ever since I left home when I turned 18. They'd always treated me like an outsider, even in my own family. My brother was the golden child. I thought it was a little weird that they started a party meant for me without me, but when I saw the cake, I completely lost it. I finally confronted my parents and asked them why they hadn't thrown me a party for an actual real achievement instead. They told me that after my acceptance letter to college, they didn't want my brother to feel left out, so they threw him a party instead. They said that instead of throwing a tantrum, I should be trying to uplift my brother as well. That just completely broke me. That very day, I made up my mind to never come back to them again, and I stuck to it. I paid my way through college by taking out a loan and working, then rented a tiny apartment with a friend. After I was done with college, I never spoke to my parents again. Neither did they try to get in touch with me. Of course, years passed, and last year, my brother reached out to me online to ask if I wanted to reconnect with him and my parents since they really seemed to miss me a lot. A lot had happened since I left home. Like 2 years ago, I'd gotten married to my ex-wife and was leading a very comfortable life, but I don't think I'd ever moved on from what had happened with my parents. So I did end up agreeing to meet them. It was awkward and uncomfortable at first, but they were making an effort to fix what they'd done to me in the past, so I felt obliged to make an effort for them as well. So I invited them to my home. I guess that was my first mistake, introducing my brother to my ex. They met, started an affair, and she got pregnant. I was really happy when I found out that she was pregnant, since I obviously thought the baby was mine. But then, as I mentioned earlier, my brother started visiting more often after I found out about the pregnancy. Initially, it didn't bother me, but it started getting weird when he would touch my wife's pregnant stomach and speak into it. My ex told me that it wasn't that big of a deal, but I just couldn't shake off the sneaking suspicion that my brother had more to do with the baby than he was letting on. 6 months into the pregnancy, I decided to go through her phone while she was asleep, and it confirmed everything I was terrified of. The text between my ex and my brother proved that it was actually his baby, and they had been together for a while now. Not only that, my ex had no intention of ever letting me know that the baby wasn't even mine. She and my brother planned on telling me about the affair after the baby was born, and then she'd get a divorce from me and finally be with my brother. They'd live off the fortune from the child support I'd be paying. The next morning, I asked her about the texts, and while she tried to deny it at first, she eventually gave up and confessed. That was the end of my marriage of 2 years. Of course, my parents sided with my brother and my ex. All their words about the two of us being equally important to them were just words. When my ex and my brother announced our divorce on social media and her decision to marry him, my entire family was fully supportive of their decision. Nobody cared that they'd ruined my mental health and broken my trust. Not only that, my ex had been lying to me for 6 months, telling me that the baby was mine. It felt as though I not just lost my wife, but also my child, and it just hurt so much. My parents told me that this was for the best, and once again, refused to even acknowledge that my brother had wronged me. In fact, they told me I should be happy that my ex and brother had finally found happiness and should join the celebrations. Once again, I cut them out of my life, and that messed up my divorce as well. My ex-wife walked away with a huge settlement sum and my car, all because my family was on my wife's side in the divorce, because she was with my brother now. She and her lawyer cooked up some story about how I was toxic and controlling and forced her to quit her job, even though it was her own choice. My family reinforced it by saying that the reason they'd cut me off in the first place was because of my misogynistic attitude and temper tantrums. The evidence was stacked against me, and I lost a lot of money in the divorce, but thankfully I got to keep the house. When the divorce was finalized, I was just glad that it was over and that I wouldn't have to see any of these awful people ever again. Luckily, there's no waiting period for divorce where I live, and my ex didn't contest it either, so I was able to wrap it all up quickly and move on with my life. It was difficult to forget about all of this, but I drowned myself in work and pushed myself to be better so that I could move on from this nasty chapter as fast as possible. That paid off since 2 weeks ago I got a promotion, better position, better salary, better company car. The works, basically, and I couldn't have been happier about it. So, I decided to treat myself to a solo dinner date at one of my favorite restaurants. But I made the mistake of posting about it online. Within a day or two, my mother contacted me and asked me to come visit them. I was baffled as to what they could possibly want from me now, since we hadn't even spoken after the divorce was finalized and they supported my ex and her lies. I managed to ignore it for a few days, but then she started calling me relentlessly, and eventually, when nothing else worked, she showed up at my office. She simply refused to leave and got into a fight with the receptionist, which was pretty embarrassing. So, I promised that I'd visit in a few days, which was how I finally convinced her to leave. A couple of days after that, I finally visited my family. They'd used the settlement amount to move into a bigger house, so they could accommodate the baby as well, who'd been born just over 3 weeks ago. I guess that the alimony was also being used to pay the bills, but truth be told, it didn't really affect me that much since the alimony was a small part of my salary at this point, and I could afford it. My brother wasn't home, and my ex was asleep, so it was just my parents who spoke to me. I didn't try to make any small talk and simply waited for them to get to the point. After around 5 minutes of silence, my father blurted out that my brother had been fired from his job, and the alimony and settlement just weren't cutting it anymore. They said they'd seen the post about my promotion and were hoping I could help them out, since they were running low on money now. My parents had retired a long time ago, my brother was out of a job, and my ex obviously wasn't going back to work anytime soon. The alimony wasn't enough to pay the bills for a family of 5, especially with a newborn in the house. I knew that, but I was shocked that they'd even had the audacity to approach me for it after everything that had happened. I was so shocked that I didn't even have anything to say for a good few minutes. But finally, I came to my senses and decided that I didn't need to entertain any of this. I simply got up and left without a word. When I reached the door and opened it, I found my brother standing outside. My parents were telling me to stay back and hear them out, and my brother looked a little alarmed to see me there. I still didn't say anything and proceeded to leave. It was raining pretty heavily, and it was a short walk to where I'd parked my car outside their lawn, so I got completely drenched and was already in a horrible mood. Now, this is where I might have been the asshole because my parents and brother came after me. While I was looking for my keys in my pocket, they decided to ask me for help one last time. This time, it was my brother who was making the plea. He's always been smug and arrogant, a direct result of the way our parents treated us. So, it was weird to see him asking me for help, and it must have taken a lot of trouble to convince him. So, they were definitely being honest about the bad phase. Anyway, I sort of lost my cool and ended up telling them to leave me alone, and that they could beg on the streets if they were really that hard-pressed for cash, since a stranger who knew nothing about them was probably more likely to take pity on their condition than I was. Having said that, I got in my car and drove away, leaving them in the rain. I'm not going to lie, it was pretty satisfying to do that to my family since they'd done nothing but mistreat me my whole life. It's been 2 days since that happened, and well, I'm not sure if I'm right anymore. My mother has been texting me nonstop, and I feel so guilty for not helping them out. I know I have a lot, and sending them a little money won't actually hurt me, but after everything that's happened, it just feels like I'm being used, quite frankly. But they managed to manipulate me since my family had no problem lying and portraying me as the bad guy for their benefit. She started crying on the phone and accused me of being selfish and heartless, which was quite ironic. When I still refused to help, she told me that my brother was right and that I'd left her with no choice but to involve the law. She said she was going to ask for a higher alimony and take me to court to embarrass me once again. Honestly, I'd like to see them try. The first time around, I was emotionally exhausted and in a really dark place, so I didn't even attempt to fight back or defend myself. I just agreed to the alimony without contesting their claims. I was never toxic, controlling, or any of the things they said I was. She had no reason to cheat on me, and I felt she didn't deserve a penny from the divorce. But at the time, I didn't care much about the financial side of things. I just wanted the divorce to be over. This time, though, I was ready to stand my ground and make sure I taught my family a lesson they wouldn't forget. In a surprising twist, my ex-wife followed through with her word and actually filed for a higher amount of alimony now that I'd received a promotion. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I reached out to mutual friends and explained everything that had happened, including the real reason for our separation, as most of them only knew about the divorce, not the full story. They were understandably shocked, and I asked them if they'd be willing to testify on my behalf if needed. They agreed, without hesitation. I also told my lawyer I wanted to completely eliminate the alimony arrangement, as I didn't feel she deserved any of it. Over the past few days, I gathered as much evidence as I could about my family's mistreatment of me, how they'd never treated me as an equal and were now trying to take advantage of my promotion. I had enough and wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to worry about their feelings anymore. I even convinced a few cousins who had seen how I was treated as an outsider growing up to speak on my behalf. Although we weren't particularly close, they agreed to help. My lawyer was very pleased with the evidence we'd compiled and believed our case was strong enough to stop the alimony payments. It was already known that my ex-wife had cheated, but the lies she told about me being the villain and my brother as the hero who rescued her were simply false. Although I didn't fight back during the first round, I wasn't going to let this time pass without standing up for myself. I presented video testimonies from friends and relatives to prove that my family had lied about me. I wasn't the person they made me out to be. I think they assumed I'd cave in again, just like last time, but I wasn't emotionally fragile anymore. What they put me through actually made me stronger. Yesterday, the case was finalized. I no longer have to pay alimony, thanks to the new evidence. I felt an incredible sense of relief and happiness. It was so satisfying to see the smug looks wiped off my family's faces, and my ex looked like she was on the verge of tears. But at that point, I couldn't care less about her emotions. I was done. I planned to go home, treat myself to some good takeout, and watch a movie, but of course, my family couldn't let me enjoy any peace. I was only a few yards away from my house when I noticed my brother's car parked outside. Confused, I went in, only to find my family standing outside my door, blocking me from entering. I was taken aback, but decided to stay calm. I told them to leave my property, or I'd call the police. That's when my dad spoke up and told me I should be ashamed of myself for what I'd done today. He went on to lecture me about how I'd betrayed the family by refusing to help them when they needed it the most. Once he finished, I didn't engage. I remained silent. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I knew they were trying to provoke me into doing something rash, but I wasn't going to fall for it. My silence probably frustrated them even more. Even though my mother demanded that I show respect to my father and talk to him, I refused to speak. I could see they were hoping for a big argument, but I wasn't going to give them that. After more shouting, my brother lost his temper and tried to grab me. He pushed me, but my dad stepped in and held him back just in time. My brother shouted that I was a loser who'd never amount to anything, which was laughable coming from someone still living at home and asking for handouts. I told them to leave, or I would call the police. They didn't have any money to fight back, so I told them they had 5 minutes to leave. Eventually they left, but not before my mother made one final attempt to guilt me into giving them money. It didn't work, and they finally left. It's been almost a day since that incident, and they haven't reached out. I'm really hoping it stays that way. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.